So now I'd like to introduce the last speaker of this morning's session, who is Professor John Rowan. And he's going to be talking about leveraging water cooperation, engaging with UNESCO water family. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, and I thank Rachel and our team for the invitation and for your indulgence to come and hear us speak and share some of the work we've been doing in the UNESCO Centre, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. But the purpose of my talk today is perhaps to extend our conversation and our consideration to the global perspective and to think about World Water Day in its true sense as a United Nations entity. And as we speak today, there's similar events all around the world. There's a major event in Paris in the UNESCO headquarters, and today we'll launch the World Water Report quite significantly this afternoon. So there's a lot of amazing things that are going on. The work that's happening here in Scotland is incredible. The joined up nature of our community here is incredible. And we have the opportunity, I think, to, through the work that we do in our collaborative internationalist spirit, to make a difference in the world. So the local and global perspectives. So I want to just kind of start, as you might expect, by kind of situating my talk in some of the global context, the global challenges. So we are, and we heard from the previous speakers, in a period of exceptional, unprecedented global turbulence. There's headwinds all around us, whether it's in relation to climate change or biodiversity loss, whether it's in relation to social inequity, the emergence of generative AI, conflicts, pandemics, insecurities, mass migrations. These things are sometimes taken together and collectively expressed as something called the polycrisis. And water is at the very heart of much of this. So it's an incredibly relevant topic. And we're talking about trying to ensure security of food and energy and water. And Patrick was just talking about the kind of nexus concept a few minutes ago. And our aspiration at both a national level and an international level is about equity and justice, social and equitable futures that are sustainable for all. The idea of leaving no one behind is incredibly important. And that's also underpins and drives the mission of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030 that is central to the UNESCO agenda that I'll speak to in just a few minutes. And also, if we think about the sheer scale and complexity, the interdependencies of the systems, the feedback loops, the consequences of action, unintended, and things that then accelerate out of control, we need to consider the opportunity of having research, which is not just scientific, but I think Rachel mentioned in her introductory remarks, that draws on social science perspectives as well, so truly interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches, and a mixture between basic and applied policy research. And I think that's why this is a wonderful occasion today where we come together, we share our ideas, our perspectives, we think about cooperation, we think about how we can purpose our energies towards tackling some of these very wicked problems that present the world, but also about the importance of trying to flip that narrative and not be doom mongers, but also to think about ways in which we can regenerate our activities, we can have a regenerative approach that actually puts energy and culture and enhances the environmental systems upon which we so depend. So just in terms of a very, very outline sketch of the UNESCO family, and I come from the University of Dundee, where we have the UK's only Category 2 UNESCO Water Centre, which I will explain in a little minute. But that situates in a kind of solar system, as represented in this cartoon, of UNESCO activities around the world. And I've put an asterisk against something that I'll speak about very briefly in the course of our talk today. But just in terms of what I can point to, there's a secretariat which is based in Paris that's trying to coordinate activities across the 172 member states of the UNESCO family. Of course, we're in Scotland. Scotland is a devolved part of the UK, but the UK is the permanent member in terms of representation at the UNESCO table. We have, I mentioned, and I'll show you something about the World Water Assessment Programme. We can recognise that around the world there are UNESCO chairs. There's in fact 76 water chairs around the world, and many of you will know David Hanna, who's the UK's only UNESCO Water Chair based at the University of Birmingham. There's various twinning activities. And then there's these things called Category 2 water centres. And we have one in Scotland here, or at least in the University of Dundee. And I will say something about that, our activities and the opportunities that basically we would like to share for all of us. I think in terms of this internationalist mission, there's opportunities for us all to participate. Sometimes UNESCO seems like a kind of club, and it has its own peculiarities and its own bureaucracies, but there are actually opportunities for us all to be engaged if you wish to be, and we can help try and facilitate some of that, and we can also help try and showcase and bask in the reflected glory of the work that this community does worldwide. So I'm only going to show you a tiny bit, but I hope it gives you a sense of there's things that we could do more of together and be more effective in the world. So this is just to give you a very kind of high-level schematic of the ambitions of UNESCO with respect to water. And much of the work of UNESCO is mediated through something called the Intergovernmental Hydrological Programme. It's now in its 9th phase. They have 7-year cycles. And really, this is trying to drive a water-secure world. It's trying to drive, particularly, its focus on SDG 6, around water availability and water for sanitation and hygiene. So that's a key mission. And we still know that there are more than 2 billion people on the planet that don't have access to safe drinking water. So that's a global challenge that we can all get involved with. Some of the new technologies that are coming out of Scotland have applications elsewhere. And the partnership idea that's at the heart of this particular day presents us with a tremendous opportunity to do good in reciprocal ways with other countries. And just in terms of the strategy document, and the current one is in the 9th phase, as you can see here on the right, just to kind of pick out the kind of priority areas that exist with respect to water. It's around science and innovation, it's around water education, around bridging data knowledge gaps, around integrated water resources management, around water governance, and the particular contribution that Dundee has made over the years is in that space, in the nexus between science and policy and law. We have had a strong tradition represented by Professor Sarah Hendry. I've been sitting beside, who's a very eminent international water lawyer. We have some track record in that space that, again, I think, presents us with opportunities to think globally around governance issues as well as locally. And just in terms of the United Nations, I mentioned that today there's a similar and parallel celebration of World Water Day going on in the UNESCO headquarters. At this time every year, they launch something called the United Nations World Water Development Report. And it's basically a kind of state of the environment, a state of the planet report. And that comes out today, I think, at 2 o'clock or something in the afternoon. But each year, there is one of these major reports produced. And it gives us insights into a coordinated approach. UNESCO try to draw from sources. So they basically invite people to make representation and to provide correspondence or provide insights that they can use in their synthesis reports. And this World Water Development Report is a good example of that. So it's authoritative and comprehensive, and it provides decision makers with tools to try and help with putting good science into good policy, into good decision making, and into good governance. And I came across something just in preparation for this talk that I think showcases the opportunity for all of us. So it picked out, quite by accident, and I didn't see it necessarily coming, but there was a very nice piece and a showcase on the Alliance for Water Stewardship, which is an entity that emerged in Scotland, and it's trying to do some incredible things about bringing different organisations together. The specific examples it's talking about are around water management and banana production in Costa Rica, and that's been developed using this water resources energy tool that's came from Scotland. So I think, and that was just highlighted and showcased as an example of best practice, as an example of the world's first Water Alliance Stewardship Group certification. So there's something really good there about being able to showcase the things that we, Scotland PLC, are good at doing, and then hopefully that can do good in the world as these techniques and technologies are applied. I showed you on my schematic of the water family in UNESCO that there are a bunch of flagship programs, and there are in fact 16 of these flagship programs which involve a number of different water-specific problems or water-specific activities around the world. So there's some that are on groundwater, there's some that are on water quality, there are some that deal with sediment dynamics. And so this range of activities or foci are supposed to bring together in a cooperative way different parts of the world working together in tackling these water-related issues. And the one that I'll just asterisk here is something called HELP, which is the Hydrology for Environment, Life and Policy Programme, which was actually initiated back in 1999 and was really one of these early attempts to think about the ways in which science and society, through the medium of the water basin concept, can actually help tackle sustainability challenges and equity issues worldwide. So it's a really interesting activity. There are 3 HELP basins within Scotland, and I'll showcase that just later. But like with many of these things, these initiatives have a degree of fashion and a degree of shelf life, and something that's started with great positivity and fanfare sometimes then begin to fade. So HELP has fallen on slightly harder times, but there's a very strong appetite from the international committees that run UNESCO to revitalise HELP, and that's something that we're going to try and do in Dundee, and we would very much welcome this to become a national initiative, and those of you who would like to be involved with that, we would very much welcome you with open arms. So let me just quickly turn to say something about the UNESCO Centre that we have here in the UK, that we have here in Scotland. It's called the Centre for Water Law, Policy and Science. It's unique in the UK as being the only Category 2 centre, and it's unique in the world and the only one that has this integrative focus on law, policy and science. And we think about this as good governance for good development. And that's the kind of tagline for what we're trying to do. And it was established back in 2008 as part of a tripartite or a trilateral agreement between the UK government, UNESCO, and the University of Dundee, which is the host for the centre. It has a mission that maps actually rather beautifully or symmetrically, as you would expect, towards the ambitions of UNESCO. And then each of the centres have their own particular flavour. So you can see at the beginning of each of these bullet points an action word. So we're developing, we're convening, we're integrating, we're providing. And that's the nature of this outward-facing looking activity, and very much in the service, spirit and ethos of UNESCO's work worldwide. And just to say a little bit about how we organise the things that we do, and a little bit of a kind of characterisation or a thumbnail sketch of the centre itself. It has a relatively small management group at its heart, who are mostly made up of university academics and professional services staff. A slightly larger associate programme where people give part-time association and involvement with the aspirations of the centre. We place great store on PhD students, and this is a group of our PhD students, many of whom are funded by the Hydronations Scholars Programme. And in this list here, there are 10 separate nationalities, so a very international community that's at the heart. And so we're trying to win competitive grants. We're trying to write good and meaningful papers that are orientated towards impact and outcomes. We attend and present on the international stage at various conferences and symposia. And we have specific contributions with respect to the UNESCO IHP strategy, Strategy 9. So in terms of our current activities, we make contributions to the strategy, particularly on the kind of governance side. So this thing here, output 5.2, is about good science into good decision-making into good governance. And our colleague Andrew Allen, who's a water lawyer, leads that on behalf of the UK and is bringing together an international coalition to tackle that issue. We mentioned that we've been invited to take more direct leadership responsibility to try and revitalise HELP, and that's quite an exciting initiative. There's lots of networking activity that we're trying to do, and I should say that I've been in post as the director of the UNESCO Centre for the last 14 months, so quite a steep learning curve for me, And one of the things I thought was really important from the beginning was to try and build the connectivity globally with the different Category 2 centres, of which there's 29. So we've managed to have strategic dialogue conversations with 22 so far out of the 29, and we're exploring mutual benefits, and we're exploring ways in which we can come together and collaborate on new initiatives. So that's been really fun. And then we do the things that you would expect, so symposia, research and consultancy, around doctoral supervision, around water education, and around public engagement. So I just showcase some of the events that we've been going to. So this is the UN headquarters where we spoke last year at the UN Water Conference. Our colleague Nandan has been doing some great work at COP 27, 28, again representing the centre, representing Scotland's work on issues like loss and damage. This is the Paris OECD meeting, where again we've been working and cooperating and working on international water governance. So just to showcase some of the projects that we've been doing, and again I've put in blue here the different countries to try and reflect the international profile. And then going into some specifics, we've been working for nearly a decade on trying to develop new generation disaster resilient homes. This project has been going for several years. Fortunately, it's been successful in winning a number of prizes along the way. The latest version we have is a brick-based house that's made out of bricks that are not fired in a kiln. So they're made from subsoils and lime. They use about 10% of the carbon of a conventional construction project. So it's supposed to be a significant contribution to disaster resilience and net zero. And just to show you an example of this compound, UNESCO are very keen on demonstration projects. So this is a demonstration project of these low-carbon, livelihood-inclusive livings. And this structure here, which weighs 250 tonnes, is built on a hollow raft. So if the monsoon floods come or the typhoon comes, this whole house will rise up and float and keep the family and the neighbours safe in times of crisis. This is what it looks like. It's been built by these local artisans who learned on the job and trained each other how to do this. This is what it looks like inside, but it's got a very integrated system of capturing rainwater, treating that rainwater, using the water in the household, filtering the water, putting it back into the garden, and it's very much a kind of circular concept. The same applies to energy, the same applies to food. So there's multiple ways in which we can promote securities. Very briefly to say that, again, these international campaigns are also driving ways in which we can collaborate and showcase the work that Scotland does. So in this particular case, we've got the Tweed Basin, which contains a very interesting project called the Eddleston Water. And in the Eddleston Water, funded by Scottish Government for the last 14 years, we've constructed a very intensive hydrometric network to test the ability of nature-based solutions to create flood, to provide natural flood management. So trying to slow down the flow, trying to minimize the peak, the time of the arrival of the peak, but also to think about all the multiple benefits that come from these interventions, these regenerative land-based interventions. So it's been going extremely well. The point to pick out here, again, that these things don't happen without lots of effort and lots of conversations and lots of collaboration. So this really began because of the policy driver of the Flood Act, the idea that we can't keep going with hard infrastructure, the need for nature-based solutions, and this project's providing the evidence base to try and create decision-making. It's been, again, quite successful. You'll have seen Chris Spray, one of our colleagues who works as the science director for the Tweed Forum, repeatedly picking up awards for this work, and the Tweed Forum have been doing amazing works, and we hope that that model can be more widely applied across Scotland. And then I was going to say a little bit more about HELP, but we're in the process of trying to reimagine it. HELP, which is climate ready and also acknowledges the SDGs, which are a new part of the debate. And then I would say something about the fact that we're trying to grow this next generation of academics. So we're trying to win new funding. We have a new regenerative innovation project called Regenerate. We have 24 new PhDs that are going to be on offer. Members of the audience would like to find out more, we can tell you later. It's based in Dundee, but it has a partnership with the Eden Project, who are bringing this new regenerative project, the Eden Project Scotland, to the city of Dundee. We're very excited to be working with them in terms of this project, but it has a strong water thematic. Again, just to show you that there's an ongoing program of activities that UNESCO has, multiple meetings that we're all openly invited to attend if you can. And just to finally say, it's a great connector water. It's amazing that we have the hydronation agenda. It's a very powerful argument, and it situates us in a global context. I hoped to show you today that the work that's going on in UNESCO in Dundee is yours, it's ours, it's our centre, and the things that we can do to both showcase your work and facilitate conversations across that international network we welcome doing. And we have to try and build this coherent national narrative, and that's why I'm very grateful to Rachel and colleagues for organising World Water Day today. So thank you very much indeed.
Fabulous, thank you, John. So obviously there's plenty of opportunities. No, I think we're not rushing away just yet. So yeah, in the future, please do get in touch with John and his team if you would like to engage in some of this fantastic international work. So let's take a few questions. Don't run away yet, John. Should we go to Slido first?
There isn't one on Slido yet.
Oh,
however, I can ask one, which is, looking through your slides, there were so many logos and associations and stakeholders and partnerships, and it just looked amazing. But I'm wondering, you know, we discussed, we often work in silos, it's hard to do collaboration sometimes. Are there any stakeholders that you really struggle to get involved in the work that you're doing, or any partnerships that you would like to see happen with the centre that you just have been really struggling to get involved?
Well, thank you. It's a great question. I mean, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say it's not difficult because Scotland's a remarkable place, and it's quite remarkable because of the level of joined-upness that already exists. So CREW has existed for nearly 10 years or more. And so that Centre for Research Expertise in Water, which, and I can see my friend Bob Ferrier sitting at the back, has been a wonderful thing to bring people together, Laura. And I think it's been a great way to connect business to academia, and it's a great way to connect our key stakeholders like Scottish Water and SEPA and the Drinking Water Inspectorate. There's much of that is actually joined up in Scotland. So I feel that the doors are open to conversations, and that the only thing that's limiting is making sure that people know that we're here and that we're open to collaboration, and that we provide a very warm welcome mat and a cup of tea if anybody wants to come.
Tea is very important. Chris? No.
I think I'm on. Thank you, John. Thanks very much for a really interesting talk. There was a point in there where you mentioned about multi-hazards, and I know here today we're here about water, and multi-hazards, of course, can be within water, flood and drought, but of course it extends beyond that as well. And I wonder whether you could just expand a little bit on the role of UNESCO Water, which you're talking about here, but more perhaps holistically with other components and other hazards that might extend beyond water and complement some of the work that you're doing and others are doing in UNESCO Water.
Thank you. No, also a great question. So UNESCO has a division called the Natural Sciences Division, and water is situated within that, but it also contains earth science and disaster risk reduction as specific thematics, and each of those has their own networks of Category 2 centres. And I was just telling Sarah that I found out yesterday that there's a meeting of all the UNESCO Category 2 centres under the natural science umbrella in May. And I will fortunately be able to go to that, and we'll have the conversations with the earthquake people and with the volcano people and with the tsunami people, and I think there's a wonderful opportunity to join that up. And just to go back to the example that I shared of our disaster resilient house, well, it's fireproof, it's earthquake proof, it's tsunami proof, and it's flood resilient because it floats. So trying to think in a really integrated way about the multiple dimensions of hazard, but also to try and promote resilience at the grassroots level for the individuals. The idea that we have with this kind of house concept is that providing security in times of crisis, but also livelihoods during times of good, creates these kind of sanctuaries, these islands where people can be safe. And that safety and that continuity of learning and existence is critical, especially for women and kids, you know, in the development context. So I think being completely aware of the multiple nature of hazard, trying to join up early warning systems, trying to join up global networks of seismics and things like that, for example, is work that UNESCO would be very interested in, and it maps beautifully to your work. So let's have a chat afterwards, and I'll try and put you in touch with the relevant people, if that's at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the floor? Oh, sorry, Sarah. I actually called you Helen a minute ago. Apologies.
It's partly a question, but also a comment, just to add to, I mean, I've been involved with the UNESCO Centre Dundee for a long time, and I think UNESCO is really good at providing a kind of global platform to bring people together and a global kind of flag. And here in Scotland, obviously, Crew, Hydronation have been doing work like that. The Scottish Government has supported the UNESCO Centre. And I think we know that water operates at every scale, but those help basins, so the Tweed Basin is both a help basin and an eco-hydrology demonstration site. I think there's 2 help basins in Aberdeenshire. Is that right?
The Dee and the Don.
The Dee and the Don are both help basins.
Do you know that?
And if we're going to be involved in reinvigorating the HELP programme, it's obviously a global network, but there's lots of scope there to look at things at a basin scale. So if the people are thinking about hydrogen, about green hydrogen, then how does that fit in a kind of catchment basin approach to water management? So there's just so many opportunities. And I wonder, John, am I right in thinking that external associates of the centre are absolutely very welcome, as well as the internal people that John had up on the slide there?
We have, yeah, just our kind of architecture is University of Dundee, and then our associates are either staff who've tangential or partial interest in water, but we've been trying to explore the idea of a broader affiliates programme that gives people an identity within the UNESCO Centre. Just some of the logistics, the institutional logistics are quite hard, but we have a number of external people who, with close association, become associates, and then others whom we can call affiliates who would be lovely to have involved in that wider family. And the more we become involved and the more we become interrelated, then we can elevate that status into full associates. Well, that would be wonderful. We would love you to be more heavily involved.
And I think that's one of the purposes of today, isn't it? Is to grow that collaboration and actually to learn from the international work that you're doing, bring that back to Scotland. I think we're very much in that place now. Well,
yes, but thank you. The work that you and your team are doing is fundamental to that as well.
Well, thanks, John. That was really fantastic. Oh, I keep saying that. Apologies. Ooh. Thank you very much, John. Right, so that concludes our morning session. So it is now time for some lunch. It's a relatively short lunch. You've got 50 minutes, and it will be served upstairs in the exhibition area. And if after lunch you can all return to this room, we will start the afternoon session with the Crew lecture. So thank you so much for your attention, and also thank you very much to the speakers for really brilliant presentations this morning. So I think I'd like to give you all a